Hello, Pod Smashers of the Internet, and welcome to another spooky episode of
Pod Smash.
Where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer.
Ooh. Tonight we are doing the Smash. Doing the Monster Smash and talking about a monster because this is airing on the very day of Halloween. Last week we talked about Halloween as a holiday. This week we are doing our Halloween tradition of talking about all the video games that feature a specific monster and almost like as a genre itself, but it's not a genre, it's a monster. And so we're doing zombies. Finally, 4 years into this series, zombies.
We didn't want to start out the gate with the most obvious, easy, low-hanging fruit when it came to monsters.
Plus, like, when we started doing this, there were still, like, zombie games coming out with at least some bit of regularity, right? Like, there was, like...
It's true.
Like I feel like the last big high-profile zombie game, aside from The Last of Us, which is discussable as a zombie game, but not exactly a zombie... We'll talk about it, but... The last like high profile zombie game that came out, as far as I'm concerned, was Days Gone, and good as it was, it's it was like the last, and it was still a couple years ago, is what I'm saying. So it's been enough time, I think.
The zombie... Dead by Daylight is the newest one. Dead by Daylight 2 came out this year, and that was pretty big.
Back 4 Blood. I forgot about Back 4 Blood too.
So they're still there.
Never mind. They're still
but
coming.
It's not. It still doesn't feel like it's in the zeitgeist of our pop culture like it used to be.
Exactly. Yeah. It was.
Like, I don't have Walking Dead shoved down my throat every channel, every YouTube ad, every Facebook ad.
Walking Dead like failed. Like the Walking Dead. We'll get into it. We're just hitting like all the major beats, and we're 2 minutes in. So we're talking about zombies. If they go by, we're also gonna in this episode more or less cover like your ghouls, your whites, your other mindless hordes of they all kind of fall in the same category of zombies. So anything, skeletons, even corpses. Frankensteins are a little different, but anything that's dead comes to or mindless, it comes to life and attacks you. We'll cover it in this episode. So we'll talk about all of the variants and variations and more. But first, we are where Gaming Goes to Grab a Beer. So I saw we have the same brand tonight, even if we're drinking different flavors. But I think we're both drinking Sam Adams, but mine is in honor of Halloween. It's a Jacko Pumpkin Ale.
These are the compliments to each other. Perfect. What do you got? Lay it on
Jacko's cinnamon and nutmeg aromas recall memories of freshly baked pumpkin pie. It has the ideal balance of seasonal spices with a crisp, refreshing finish. This pumpkin ale pairs perfectly with the transitions of summer into cooler days and nights, and it has like jack-o'-lanterns on the front and stuff, so totally a Halloween beer.
Of course.
Jacko. Yours?
I should be drinking a pumpkin beer as well, but I went through all of those episodes of the podcast with the idea of getting Oktoberfests, and I did this solely because I was given so much grief by a friend of our show, Sean, who said, there's so many better Oktoberfests out there than the one I'm drinking tonight. You should go try them. So I did for like 10 episodes straight. It was a different Oktoberfest from a different brewery, and they were all amazing in their own way. So tonight I land on the staple, the one and only, the yearly seasonal Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
Huzzah.
It gets rap horns.
Is it as awful as...
It's nowhere near as good as any of those other Oktoberfests I had. Sean was totally right. I mean,
it's Sam
I'm not
Adams.
Surprised. Yeah,
it's Sam Adams. Sam Adams is like, it'll do in a pinch. And for me, there's like very rarely anything good. It's a toss-up. Sometimes there's good stuff at Food Lion, but sometimes there's not. So yeah. So, but hey, this is
Sam Adams Oktoberfest.
Hey, this is pretty good though. This is pumpkin-y. I like this. This is strong. And you know what? I have said that before. I've said that their Oktoberfest is good and passable, and we'll get the job done. But quite frankly, some of their other stuff too, like I like their cold snap, and this is now, I'm pretty impressed with this Jacko. Very flavorful. Very good. So, cool. All right. Well, I guess we could do a little bit of banter. But I've been really enjoying like cutting out banter and going straight into favorite things. But let's talk a little bit about some stuff.
Things. So, we've been playing I'm going to talk about Halloween games. It's Halloween. What are we playing that's scary? We get into scary games every single year. Like, I'm always playing something. I've done Until Dawn in the past. I've done Resident Evil 7 last year. I've done Resident Evil 2. Of course, Resident Evil is kind of my favorite. So We tried to play Bloodborne. I've played it twice now. Once you in my ear, once with you in my game. So that I get
3
0.
times. You played
Is
it
it 3?
once by yourself and got massacred.
That's I thought
You
it was only
played it.
2. Yeah.
No,
Once
we
by
played
myself,
it.
and then you and I played once.
Once by yourself, once me in your ear, and then once the two of us together. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it was 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand the Halloween vibe, but I don't get any horror out of it. None. Like, it's not scary whatsoever. I don't know if it's supposed to be.
No, it's cosmic horror, meaning that like the horror comes from the elements of like no, it's fear of the unknown in the sense that like the horror elements come from the things that are it is one of those things where you have to know the story, but it's like it's the idea of like, oh, there are things that I don't understand or that are unknowable, like the unknowable things, because all the things you fight are just basically like people who have been like morphed and twisted and corrupted by powers that they don't understand and that are beyond comprehension. And that's what's it's. So it's much more of a subtle psychological horror. But I gotta also argue that like if you're like there's the tension at the very least of like any From Software game has that like, oh, they'll jump out and like and just the dread of facing something that is challenging and tough that it also has going for it. But you're right, it's not horror in the sense that Resident Evil or Silent Hill are. It is a different kind of horror, and it's much more in line with like the old gothic horror and cosmic horror, where it's like the horror aspect comes from like just survive this thing and these things that are just so far beyond you. But yeah, no, I mean when you're equipped with like a giant no, I wouldn't call it a horror game in the same way that I would call Resident Evil or Silent Hill a horror game.
So you know, Bloodborne.
But hey, did you do? I mean, but as a Halloween game, in regards to the vibe of like this looks, sounds, and feels like a Halloween game.
Yeah,
horror side.
Oh yeah, yep. And the barrier of entry, the mountain to climb to sit down for a session of Bloodborne is like, if you want something quick, you only got like a half hour and you want to dip in and out. I started Resident Evil 3. Do you know how short that game is? The remake?
Oh, it's so short. No,
I had
no
no
because
clue.
I played it. All the way through. Yeah, it's good.
I finished the entire game on the easiest difficulty in 4 hours total. And I was just like dabbling a half hour here, like tiny micro sessions. Is that what people call it? I microdosed it. Like,
yeah, no, it was like, it was very.
It was like crap. I have like 15 minutes before the next meeting. I'm gonna run in here and do this. And like, I had a blast.
It was always a short game, though. I mean, it was always.
Yeah, I guess it was, but I never played the original except for like renting it. And Resident Evil 3 is way more fast paced, way more actiony, way more linear, and way less scary than Resident Evil 2.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Like completely different. Yeah.
Yep.
And I was so surprised.
The irony being, of course, for being the game that like created Nemesis and created the idea that something big and powerful is hunting you, they didn't utilize Nemesis nearly. It was all like preordained.
Yeah, it was all scripted stuff. Yeah,
events, as opposed to in Resident Evil 2, it was like the tyrant could kind of pop out of nowhere for like a large.
That was so dreadful. Resident Evil 2 was terrifying.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So,
but it's been kind of neat, like to go through Resident Evil 2, 7, 8, and now 3. You know, the latest 4 I've now kind of went through, and 7 is just still unbelievably terrifying in every single way.
This year, unlike last year, this year I did finish my run through of Bloodborne, killed the hardest bosses that I love and hate, and then I just kind of like was like, well, I want to revisit Sekiro, and then I spent like a couple of nights in Sekiro and just wanted to play Elden Ring by the end of it. I don't know. I was like, Elden Ring. So I have the last couple of weeks just been indulging in Elden Ring and have like completely blown up any like playing of any horror and spooky Halloween games. But right now I'm just holding on until Bayonetta 3 comes out. That's the next game that's like on my mind and on my heart. I really want to play Bayonetta 3, and it feels like it's a game that should come out in October, right? Even though it's not spooky scary, it still feels like it's like, yes, please give me my witch queen, slay, guns, feet, dancing, summoning monsters. I'm stoked on that game. I really hope it's Like it could bomb, and I acknowledge that, and I'm keeping my expectations low at the same time. But at the same time, I'm also like, but it has the potential. There's potential in here, right? It's the third in a franchise that has just gotten like better and better with each entry. It's got a cult following. It's pulling in elements from Scalebound, which was a highly anticipated game from this developer, and it's got that. It's just got that it's got that nice little controversy tacked on there too. That just I'm like Bayonetta 3. The downside is I won't be able to play it till literally Halloween because it comes out the 28th, but I will be at the beach when it arrives. So I actually need to think how to do. I might have like my brother-in-law come pick it up and hold on to it just because it'll be sitting there on my porch like the day before Halloween. So who knows who might be
trick or treat. Oh, what's this?
Oh, exactly. So, but I will be back on the 31st and I will snag it and play it on Halloween. So,
yeah. I dabbled in Bayonetta 1. I started my playthrough of that. Maybe
fun.
like the first or second chapter. It's amazing. The game's awesome.
It's
and
so
like
good.
as I was playing, I was like, I wish I didn't have to go to bed right now. As I'm sitting on my bed, like on my Switch.
Even, 2 is even better, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta get 2. I don't have 2 yet.
It's like the one is great, but 2, like they just like everything's heightened. The game feels better to play, less clunky. They had gotten the mechanics down a little bit better, I think. Everything feels a little bit snappier and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked 2. I liked both actually, but I'm looking forward to 3. Again, it's one of those things where it's like sometimes they just need like a couple entries in to really get the like nail the format, and who knows, or it could bomb. We'll see. I would love to get into the controversy, but unfortunately,
it's just
it's
a
just
mess.
not. Yeah, it's a mess, and it would be too long. So instead, we can talk about how horror games and fun Halloween themed games, or completely derailing your Halloween gaming plans in order to play games you've already played multiple times this year, are our favorite things. But
80-bit pod smashes our favorite thing.
80-bit pod smashes our favorite thing.
Favorite things. A little segment of our show where we talk about something that we're digging, something fun that we've experienced this week, something we dug, deep, meaningful, dig, or shallow and easy. It could be a meal or one-on-one with your son, daughter, child that meant a lot to you. Anyway, my favorite
could
thing.
Be a meal of your son or daughter if you are.
Why not?
A zombie. See,
it
all ties together. That's
does.
been going through my head the whole night since I was like, I need to start thinking about the episode we're recording tonight. Zombie. That and Zombie Nation. Zombie Nation.
Nice.
Zombie Nation.
So many songs. Thriller. You can do that too.
Yeah, but not that one. I mean, yes, but not that one as well.
Yeah.
Okay, go. Favorite thing.
There's a board game called Betrayal: House on the Hill.
Yeah.
You've played it with me before. You and I have played this game before. I played it 1,000,000 times. I procured a copy of the 3rd edition about a month or 2 ago, and I had a chance to play with some neighbors a couple of times. One night was in my house, and then a second time was up at our common house. I walked across the little way over there to our little scary, very spooky
common house. Mm-hmm.
If you want to call it that, yes. Our cult house.
I would like very much to call it that.
And I had a blast. Betrayal's great. And I guess the difference between a 3rd edition and the previous ones is now you can choose which scenario you go down, which this will be lost on anyone who hasn't played the board game. But there's a scenario that dictates the plot of that round, that session that you're having, and what's going on.
I liked how the conditions.
The conditions are all there, but all 50 scenarios are now divided into 5 bigger categories. So you can choose if you're getting the same stuff or same things. You want to mix it up. You can change the macro level
Gotcha.
of what you're getting by swapping a card
enough.
at the beginning, and you get to pick.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Yep. So
Cool.
still lots of replayability, tons of replayability, and unpredictability, and I had a blast. So both
we
times
started
were
playing. Our friend of the show, Matt, he has the legacy version where it like carry each time.
I would love to do that.
It's like, and then each time you play, it's like you're a different descendant of the same family.
Yeah,
and you
That's
like
cool.
keep ending up at this house.
That's really cool.
It's really cool. But our plans got derailed by just life changes and part COVID, but it's also just some sort of, we just played a lot of board games like early into our marriage, and then just I think I can speak for myself and say I got kind of burned out of board games in general, but I would love to start it up again.
Mm-hmm.
But he has also said there's like another edition of Betrayal he recently got, and he said it has some really cool stuff. I don't know if it's 3rd edition or not, but I do know that
there is an expansion that apparently is amazing. When I was looking at the reviews for the 3rd edition, they were like, the expansion of the second edition is better. You should get that.
Nice.
It's like, oh,
interesting.
okay.
Fun. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. My favorite thing is, I feel like this ends up being one of my favorite things every year, but it's going to be this year too. My favorite thing is sort of actually like a sequel to, I think I had talked about going to Sneed's a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we got a big jumbo pumpkin, and it was a white pumpkin. I've never gotten a white pumpkin in my life. Finally carved the thing, and because it was white, I was like, I want to make a ghost this year. And Gavin was all about it. My son was like, yeah, let's make a ghost. So we made a ghost, and it's simple. It basically just looks like a spookier version of one of the Pac-Man ghosts, right, without the cute eyes. But it's just your simple ghost. But I'm so freaking proud of it, because I did the thing where you like just do an outline, where it's like you do an outline of the shape you want, and it's just a line. So I didn't carve out a shape. I just carved like a line to make the shape, and then carved the eyes and the mouth out of that shape. But because it's a white pumpkin, it's a spooky ghost, and I'm like, yeah. And my son's always like, I want to look at the ghost. So it's a blast. He's enjoying it. So did that like this weekend, but I was like, it's the weekend before Halloween. I should carve this thing out finally. And it was a pain because it was a jumbo pumpkin. So it was like, am I done scooping guts out yet? So I'll never complain about having to scoop the guts out of a normal size pumpkin. Yeah, but this one was a pain. So, but yeah, that's my favorite thing. It's my pumpkin. So, all right. Well, that leads us to our final segment,
which is
DLC. Stands for downloadable content. It is a segment of our show where we share with you a prompt, a question of sorts that is a little gimmicky, gamey kind of question. May or may not relate to our main topic, but it is meant to be a question you wouldn't normally ask about video games. And tonight is in honor of our DLC monster Smash Zombies. What monster from a video game would you in the same way that you can't pick zombies, obviously, but in the same way that zombies are like, we always talk about the idea of the zombie apocalypse, right? Like, these monsters, if they were to exist, would inevitably result in an apocalyptic scenario where they would take over by their very nature. You don't see the vampire apocalypse. You don't see werewolf apocalypse. Closest thing we get are like the alien apocalypse, whatever. But
how do you pluralize apocalypse?
You get apocalypses, I think, is what the plural is, but I like apocalypse.
Yeah.
Although theoretically there should only ever be one apocalypse, because
right, that's why I was laughing. That's exactly
yes. You can't have ends of the world. That would be silly.
Right. Yeah.
So, anyways, apocalypse. Gosh, this got derailed. Which, in the same way that there's the zombie apocalypse, what video game specific monsters, or the monsters you only see in video games, what would be a perfect video game monster candidate for another apocalypse? So like,
take some,
for example, the Goomba apocalypse, and what would it look like? How would they spread or take over one way or another?
I'm gonna go with that. Okay, I got one.
Okay, what you got?
All right, my pick is a apocalypse of likes from The Legend of Zelda. The little worm, amorphous worm that steals your shield, that like pulls you in and eats and chews on you and then spits you out.
Oh, that! Wait, not the one with the like with the arms and they lean over. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's different iterations of it, but yes. But they're annoying because they would be in a dungeon and they would slowly like lurk over to you and they would suck you in and you'd spit you out and your shield would be gone and you'd have to go buy a new one. And yeah, that's and can you imagine an apocalypse of they're vertical worms?
I know, they're so freaking terrifying. They're the most ridiculous things.
Yeah, they're like 6 foot tall cakes. They look like a nasty, disgusting worm cake. Like a layered cake with a hole in the middle with teeth, kind of like a Sarlacc pit miniature that like moves around on the surface. So it would like slurp around and just like eat all of the people and then like spit them all out naked. And there would be an apocalypse of them. So there'd be so many you wouldn't even be able to eat or sleep. Like they'd just be everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It would just be this disgusting mess. And of course it would troll you. So it would take your food and take your supplies, and yeah, it would just be awful.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I got a couple ones. I was gonna say the first one that came to mind, and I had to like look it up to make sure I knew what I was talking about because I haven't actually played this game, but I'm still familiar with this monster. But the head crabs
from Half-Life.
From Half-Life, yeah, those are ones. I've just
totally
heard tales of the head crabs, yeah,
They're
and they
terrifying.
seem like an apocalypse monster.
I'm
also going to take a couple. I'm going to make a couple picks here from From software games. There's people who've played Bloodborne will be familiar with the Winter Lanterns. They are basically these like, I mean, they just, by looking at them you go crazy, meaning that like there's a crazy it's called frenzy, and it literally makes your brain explode, and they just kind of like sit around and they like go la la la, like they sing to themselves when you're not attacking them, so you always know they're coming. And then all you have to do is like stare upon them, and eventually your brain explodes. So, and it's fast too. Like that status bar builds up across the screen. You're like, no, I'll kill them faster. That's one. And then I have to go with probably the absolute worst creatures ever designed in any video game, especially any From Software game. But there's a thing in Dark Souls 1 called the wheel skeletons, and they are what they sound like. They are a skeleton with a wheel built into them, and they just roll at you. And those things unleashed upon the world, it wouldn't even be that they have to take over. They would just murder everything because they're wheels. Like bullets, and they're skeletons. Bullets, you they can't stop. I mean, I guess bombs, but I still feel like all you would do with a bomb is just then make the flaming wheel rushing at you on fire. And that's even worse somehow. So yeah, wheel skeletons, look it up. They're terrifying.
Maybe you could just like go to higher elevations and then they'd be done.
They have spikes built in them, and so the wheels can go up walls. They actually can't in the game, but I would imagine that it would only be a matter of time until someone puts climbing spikes on them and they vertically up the wall.
Yeah, you're done.
No!
That's it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm sure we could find some way to stop them in the real world, but by then it would be too late. The wheel skeletons would be everywhere. So cool. That's you'll see. We want to hear your answers. Which video game monster would be most likely to cause an apocalypse that aren't zombies? And yeah, we would love to hear your thoughts and more. Termite, can you share all the places where they can share their thoughts, including our brand new one?
Ooh, we have a new one. That's spooky.
We have a new place.
Just
in time for Halloween.
Just in time to have yourself scared to death by us. Not literally. So,
just
you
our
can find us
ugly faces.
Yeah, exactly. Hey. You can find us over at Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and Discord. You can interact with us there. And our brand new social media platform is TikTok. We're on TikTok now.
It's TikTok/80bit Pod Smash, just the same as all of our 80bit Pod Smash, no funny business.
Yeah, so 80bitpodsmash.com is our landing website with links to everything except, I imagine, TikTok. We haven't added those. We haven't added a link to TikTok yet, but hopefully by the time you hear this on Halloween Day, because we're recording in advance, you'll have a link at 80bitpodsmash.com. I will do that tonight after this episode. I will fix that. And so go to 80bitpodsmash.com and check that out. If you're finding us from TikTok, or you found us on YouTube or Twitch or wherever else you might find us, we have a weekly video game podcast that drops every Monday at midnight. And you can find links to the RSS feed and the podcast episodes for Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. And guess what? The same website, 80bitpodsmash.com. It's got all the audio platforms too. So go check us out. We're everywhere that you want us to be, and if not, let us know. No one told us to go to TikTok except for Co-opetition Matt, friend of the show.
Yes,
he was like, "Hey, you should go to TikTok." It's like, okay, well, someone in our audience said we should be somewhere that we weren't, and now we are.
I was gonna say, I forgot to mention. I was gonna say the flood, like was gonna be my first answer, but then I realized the flood. No, they're basically zombies. They are basically zombies. It's like the same kind of idea. Yep. And I was just looking through another list though to get like, because I can't stop myself sometimes. I think the Great and Mighty Pooh from Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yes,
would absolutely cause
the Great Mighty Pooh. Yeah, it's great.
100%.
Yeah,
great. Hey, look, you're dead. Oh, dead hands. Dead hands are what they're called in.
From Zelda. Yeah, that's
why I was confused. I would have recognized the dead hand. So
dead hands, they just fall from the ceiling. You hear the whoo.
No, the dead hand is the one that does like grab you and then like
and pulls you up
over and eat. No, I'm talking about the thing that like it's like the hands
look
come
up.
What
a like is. I definitely know. I saw it. A like. Look up a Legend of Zelda like.
Like
it's the
Zelda.
worm. In Ocarina of Time, they were big worms.
Oh, the worm. Okay, yeah, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ones that like come, like that. All the hands come up, and then that
Yeah, I
like
know what you're
creepy
talking about.
thing with its. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
And he like bends over and. Okay, cool. Zelda also has the Shrieker zombies, which are
Yeah, they
just
do. Yeah,
the worst.
yeah. That was like Ocarina of
Yeah.
Time and Majora's Mask era. I don't know if those
Yep.
persisted into any later entries.
No, I don't think so. I don't recall seeing them ever again. So.
Yep.
So that's that. That is our DLC, and that's where you can find us and share. My goal is to do our DLCs now on TikTok every week, so you can answer there directly. Like you can do a video responding to my face with your face, and or you can just type a comment on the actual thing. But
yeah,
it's TikTok. Why not take the time to just record yourself responding to me, and then we can be friends. Or bitter rivals, which is almost just as good as friends. Like, haven't you ever wanted to have an Ash to your Gary? Let me be the Gary to your Ash.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about zombies now. So that is concludes our DLC, which leads us to our main topic. We're talking about zombies. Monster Smash! We literally labeled this main topic, I roll zombie games. So let's talk a little bit about the thing first. So what are zombies? If you could boil zombies down to like their basic elements, what are they? But also, let's talk a little bit about the history. Where does the zombie come from? And then we'll talk a little bit about the pop culture proliferation of zombies, and then finally some sort of descriptions or folklores or kind of the things that make zombies like identifiably now that people kind of latch onto, that have become the, as you put it, zeitgeist around zombies. So
yeah.
So how would you define a zombie? What makes a zombie a zombie?
My definition of a zombie is from George Romero, which is like the newer
which is
pop culture version.
I mean, that's it, right?
That's
like that's
it.
the yep. Mm-hmm,
yeah,
yep.
Night of the Living
what
Dead
popularized it. Yep.
Yeah, it's a slow, lurking, undead human being who wants to eat your brains for survival. It is basically your brain is overcome by either a parasite or like an infectious disease that kind of shuts down all cognitive functions except for basic survival instincts such as walking. That you don't need to breathe, you don't need any of those things to somehow you're undead. It's definitely mythical and science fiction, but these slow lurking, you can like remove their limbs and they keep going, and the only way to stop them is to sever the head, because the brain is where the primary functions of life, quote unquote, are with it. So that's the zombie. And of course, my first exposure to zombies was Resident Evil, which is kind of based on George Romero. So I never actually seen Night of the Living Dead. It's just I know that's the roots.
No, it is. It's the roots.
It goes back farther than that, though.
It absolutely goes back farther, and we'll talk about that. But the general idea, to me, the kind of the major characteristics of zombies are the idea of like mindlessness. They're mindless, and they are just sort of like they consume or they just sort of follow, like they're just sort of like a horde, a swarm of like mindless things that just sort of either are directed under the bidding of something like the Flood have a hive mind, but like even the idea of like a necromancer or a reanimator or something where they're controlled by some mad crazy scientist or magician, like that all ties into it. But one way or another, they're just like, it's a mindless thing. And it's as we'll talk about later, it's like it's a very easy thing to kill without having any moral qualms.
Yep.
There sometimes is an undead component to it, right? Not always, but most of the time there's some kind of like, this thing is now dead. Even if it was alive before, it is now dead. So like I think of, the difference between like Night of the Living Dead, where they are undead, like they're literally corpses that have risen from the dead, versus something like 28 Days Later, where they are just people who are infected, but they've become so mindless that they might as well be. They tap into sort of two primal fears. One is the loss of the autonomy, the loss of freedom, the loss of someone being afraid that I could just be controlled and lose all my autonomy. That is definitely a fear with zombies. That's kind of the primary fear. But also I would say there's a little bit of body horror too. Like the idea of, man, they consume, they bite, they rip, they tear, they want to mutilate, and they themselves are mutilated. So there's sort of a fear of like, what if I became so mindless that I would just let that happen to me? There's a body horror element too there that I think is fascinating with zombies. There's also some like cultural fears too that zombies tap into. The idea of like, I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, they did a statistic, and I think this is an outdated statistic just because I think that, again, zombies fell out of vogue. But there was a while where you could track like zombie movies and vampire movies, and it was almost always when there was a Republican in the Oval Office, there were more zombie movies, and when there was a Democrat in the Oval Office, there were more vampire movies. And that's because we have cultural fears.
Interesting.
And there was a cultural fear that, like, oh, the Republicans are going to turn us all into mindless consumers. And then when the Democrats were in the office, there was the cultural fear of, oh my gosh, the Democrats are going to turn us into morally depraved, bloodsuckers, right? That just sort of leech off of the good, hard, God-fearing people of society, and they're going to turn us all into people who are afraid of the cross itself, right? Like there's this weird cultural like stigma, I guess, against these that these movies by their very nature tap into. So yeah, zombies are the tapping into the Democrats' fears of what a country designed by Republicans would look like, is what I'm telling you right here, right now.
Okay.
But yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the history, though, because they weren't always that. Zombies primarily come from Haitian folklore, actually, and they're actually almost more of a westernized version of like a misunderstanding of Haitian folklore. But the word itself comes from, again, a poor translation of what might be like the Haitian word Nzambi, like spelled Nzambi, which I think would still be pronounced Zambi or zombie. And then there's another word, Zumbi, and both of those, the first one means God, like a god, a spirit, and the other one means more like a ghost, a specter, or something like that. So they come from, we talked about ghosts as one of our episodes in this, and ghosts go back even farther back to our prehistory. But the idea of the undead has existed, like the undead rising from their graves has existed for a long time in one way, shape, or form, overlapping, of course, with a lot of other monsters like vampires. But the idea of like wights have existed, WIGHT, corpses that have been reanimated by some magic for some purpose, revenants, skeletons, even like the idea of skeletons have existed, like the idea of a skeleton being animated like a puppet master. Has existed for as long as like stories of dark magic have existed. So many of those are very westernized versions of things, but so many cultures have this idea of like the mindless creature rising from the dead. But here's the cool fact. This is probably like one of the facts I love the most. There's also a real life voodoo ritual, or hoodoo. I think hoodoo is the actual like practice and voodoo is the religion. It's a little confusing to a Western person like me, but there's like a hoodoo ritual that witch doctors would perform in some of these cultures, African and Haitian cultures. And it was they would produce real life, what they would call zombies. And it was a combination of two drugs, one being a pufferfish venom and the other being, I forget what the other drug is, but you can combine these two drugs in powdered form. And what it produces is a hallucination, or not a hallucination, but it produces like your mind basically goes blank. And then you just sort of mindlessly follow the orders that you're given. And they would like give this combination of powders and like force people to work as slaves. And they were mindless. They couldn't fight. They couldn't resist. And they would just do what they're told because they're drugged up and high on these like literal toxins. And It was crazy. So supposedly, now this is all the account of like a dude who swore that he like became zombified using and then wrote about it later. And I don't know if it's ever been like corroborated scientifically speaking, but supposedly there was an actual like process that people could undergo. You didn't become undead, but it had that same mindless effect where you didn't like feel pain or care about it. You would just work until the drugs wore off pretty much. And that's terrifying that something like that could possibly exist.
Terrifying. Not surprised that anybody would employ that on anyone. So
yeah,
even
exactly.
if it was real.
There's a lot of really cool, interesting history about, the origins of what we call zombies and what that came from. But, it would really blow up in pop culture, as you mentioned, with Dawn of the Dead, which is where the term zombie, I believe, was first used to do this. And there was a big transition. Zombies used to be associated very much with magic and necromancy and sorcery. And then there was a switch where it then became like a science fiction thing. And it was like, oh, now now within the zeitgeist, the primary like quote delivery method, what produces zombies, is almost always some kind of experiment gone wrong: a virus, a pathogen, a parasite, a fungus.
Yep.
Last of Us, and something where it's like this is like a biological experiment gone haywire, gone wrong.
Yeah.
And that became now in pop culture, that's it. But some of the most gosh, like we've already mentioned so many of them, right? Like not only George Romero's stuff, but then also, like you said, The Walking Dead. There was a huge, there was, video games, of course, themselves played a huge role in popularizing the zombie thing with Resident Evil, and then just all the zombie games,
House of the Dead,
zombies being a part of, like becoming a part of Call of Duty, like an inexorable part of Call of Duty, even, and it just like, and just that mid 2000s. But some of the greatest zombie movies, of course, like 28 Days Later, I think. And yeah, I mean, I would even agree that like early seasons of The Walking Dead were fantastic zombie stories. And The Walking Dead comics, of course, too, being a graphic novel, that played a huge role in it as well. And I mean, there was like zombies everything, man. Like zombies in, what would you call it? I mean, they had Marvel zombies, right? Like there's a run of Marvel zombies and stuff like that. So
yeah, zombie flavored everything.
Yeah, I would not be be able to call myself a fan of horror and stuff if I didn't also mention Evil Dead and
of course
Army of Darkness too. So those by Sam Raimi and what's his name? Great actor. Oh, I'm blanking.
What is that guy's name? I know it too.
This is painful, man, because I know him. He plays Ash. I know his character name, but I'm blanking on the actor's name. It'll come to us.
Bruce Campbell.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
No,
and I didn't have to look it up. Bow. Termite knows some things.
You win nerd points over me, so
hey, sometimes.
So speaking then, after pop culture got its hands on it in the starting in the 70s, late 70s, and then of course becoming just blowing up in popularity in the late 90s, early in mid 2000s. The sort of like folklore, so to speak, and descriptions of zombies, it is kind of, you hit some of the main ones too: destroy the brain, remove the head.
Yeah,
like I said, the sort of the mindless consumer, and then the apocalypse is inexorably tied with it. The zombie apocalypse. I mean, talk to any nerd kid in 2005 and say,
we all knew what it was.
What is your zombie apocalypse plan? And everybody had an answer. Everybody had.
Well, what was that book? There was the How to Survive a Zombie Apocalypse, right? Max Brooks.
Max Brooks. Oh man, Max Brooks he had two books that were incredible. The Zombie Survival Guide, of course, is probably his best. And then he actually wrote an incredible book called World War Z. That was the movie wasn't nearly as good.
There's a video game too.
The book was and they unfortunately don't do it justice, because what made the book great was like he created this fictional zombie war, so to speak, where there was a zombie apocalypse, but humanity came through it and like society existed, so it wasn't an apocalypse, but it was almost an apocalypse. And then the whole story is just told as memoirs from it. So it's like a person interviewing a bunch of different people who survived it and getting their stories, and that's all it is, and it's so incredible. Anyways, that is another one that I have to pay homage to.
And I have to give a shout out to Zombieland.
Of course, Zombieland.
That movie's amazing.
It's great. Yeah. But yeah, all these things now have the ideas of, I mean, the big thing is like their weaknesses are the brain, right? And then yes, there's the zeitgeist around like they want to eat brains as well. It's both their hunger and their weakness. That sort of fell out. Now they just sort of mindlessly consume flesh. But yeah, I mean, anything that's mindless and falling apart with like no regard to their own body, horror, right? And like that's not probably a zombie.
Ooh.
So well, let's talk about video games. What makes a zombie game, or what makes a game a zombie game, and what gameplay genres blend well with zombie games?
It's funny that obviously zombies make a zombie game. Duh. Left 4 Dead. Okay, zombie game. Got it. Like there's hordes of zombies. But then you have these like new games that are trying to not label themselves as zombie games. Like Days Gone is perfect. Mm-hmm. They're not zombies, they're called freakers. Okay, well, what makes a freaker a freaker? Well, it's a virus. The freaker virus got to them and they became mindless and enraged and super abilities, and they can like sprint and throw things. But they travel in hordes and they behave exactly like what we know as zombies, and they yell and murmur. And like,
I want to say that came from the Walking Dead comics, the idea of being like, "Go, they're not zombies, they're called walkers," and they never used the zombie term. In fact, again, another shout out. It's this whole episode, guys, is going to be shout outs randomly, where we'll be like zombie movie. But I think of like Shaun of the Dead, of course, one of my favorite like
Yep.
zombie parodies.
Yeah.
And they always go, we don't use the Z word.
Nice.
But it doesn't matter. It's like, to me, I'm like, the Flood are zombies. I'm sorry. I don't care if you don't want to call them zombies. They're zombies. The like fungus beasts in Left
The
4
Last of
or
Us.
not Left, The Last of Us. They're zombies. And even though I would personally hesitate to call The Last of Us a zombie game, I only do so because, or rather, I would still, still assent to the fact that it may not be a zombie game, but it still takes place. The setting is one of zombie apocalypse, because I don't care if you don't call them that; they're zombies. Anything that's mindless is and produced by some kind of pathogen is a zombie in spirit, if not in name. So sorry, Days Gone, it's a zombie game.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I
Yeah.
guess what makes games zombie games is there's usually either a global apocalypse, or if it's like one of those games that are set at like the origin or the spear point, patient 1 or patient 0, it's like your building or your ship or your space is like overcome by zombies, and it might be an
Right.
isolated event. And I'm talking about Resident Evil 1.
What
was
about
an isolated
Plants vs Zombies?
Oh, that's an action game. Is it considered a zombie game though? I mean, it's a different genre.
Is it? I don't know. Hey, and that's a question. Can your games have
Zombies in the
zombies
title.
in them and not be a zombie game?
I would not say that that's like a traditional zombie game. That's a tower defense game. There are tower defense games that have zombies in them, and they're not zombie games.
Tower defense zombie game though.
Right. There are tower defense zombie games.
I would agree with you though, nevertheless, though, just because it has a zombie in it doesn't necessarily make it a zombie game. I feel like what I would define a zombie game as is like zombies are the primary draw, in the sense that the zombie game still like taps into the same fears that the zombie as a horror icon taps into, which is the idea of you alone or a small group of survivors against a horde of zombies, or like you said, it takes place in a world where the vast majority of the population have been turned into these things, and you are the only one who has to you have to find a way to survive. So there's still an element of survive, even if it's a story action game or whatever. There's still the element of like you are surviving in a world that has been taken over by things where civilization has fallen apart, specifically due to the fact that everybody became mindless, which again is very much a cultural fear that we all have, right? Like civilization will fall apart because all of you gave up your minds to something, right?
And it's cool now, of course, as video games have evolved over the last 40 years, how different genres can represent zombie things in them. And of course, survival horror was the first, foremost, easiest to do, Resident Evil. But then you have the cooperative first-person shooter action game, Left 4 Dead, like Strategery and all of those things. Yes, I use that word. And Dead Rising was an Xbox 360 almost launch title from Capcom that involved zombie apocalypse, where you were a photographer, and you it's sort of like pseudo open world, and you'd run around, like you start off in the mall and you grab random objects and just mow down zombies trying to get out, and you have a health. And so it's more of a sandboxy kind of like Just Cause, Grand Theft Auto style like game, which I would not classify as survival horror at all. And then you have
and then there's I think of like even just straight survival games like 7 Days to Die, where zombies are all over the place, and there's even like a zombie like swarm, but the emphasis of the game is less on like, oh, you are going through a story, it's telling a narrative experience, or with jump scares and stuff, and it's more just about like your goal is to build a base and survive this. I would still classify that as a zombie game, which is why I would still count many tower defense games that have zombies in them as zombie games, because it's that same element of like, in this case, you are kind of mowing things down, but it's still that same idea, tapping into that idea of like, oh, you have to build up and use the resources you have and can get a hold of in order to survive this thing. We'll shout out to RimWorld, because our friend, my coworker and friend of the show, Shane, always talks about RimWorld. But I won't say that
every friend who does the same. His name is Ben. Shout out to him.
And I would say that RimWorld, I would say, can be more than a zombie game, but I feel like every time I watched him play it, it was some kind of zombie scenario that he was playing through. So good zombie game in that as well. So
there's a good twin stick shooter from Housemarque, who made Returnal, called Dead Nation. Top-down twin stick shooter, and that's super arcadey and fun. That's totally a zombie game.
I was going to say House of the Dead, like you had mentioned that before, where it's a rail shooter, right? So there's lots of, I feel like shooters in general blend well with it. I haven't seen a ton of zombie games that aren't that.
Yeah.
However, there are, we had mentioned tower defense, but there, I think RTSs, you can have real-time strategy games that also have, feature zombies, and there are zombie elements for sure, at the very least, in games like Fallout. So there are, and I've seen Fallout clones that are zombie games too. So like, so they're zombie games. I feel like they do work better with some genres than others. However, you could have a plethora of genres that are still zombie games.
I still want to play State of Decay, Xbox exclusive State of Decay. I heard that's pretty fun, like open world co-op.
Isn't
sandboxy State of Decay?
What's it called?
Dead by Daylight?
I don't know. No, gosh, there's so many zombie games.
There is.
Dying Light. Is Dying Light a zombie game?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I figured
that's parkour. That's the parkour one.
The park. Yep. Yeah. No, I've heard good things about Dying Light. Cool.
All right. Dead Island is like the Borderlands of zombie games. Sorry. There's so many.
Well, and there's what was the game? Wasn't there? Oh gosh, this came out during like the very beginning of the zombie craze. But wasn't there a game that you're in the mall? And
Dead Rising.
That is Dead Rising.
Yeah, I talked about
Dead
that.
Rising.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will throw out another game out there and say Lollipop Chainsaw.
Yeah, I haven't played that though. Have you played it?
No, I haven't either. It's got like a cult. Supposedly, it's a really good game, and it's in the same vein as Bayonetta. It's like it's meant to be a parody of like hypersexualized female characters, and yet at the same time, it's like, but guys, it's also a hypersexualized female video game character in and of itself. I get you're doing a parody here, but also you're also still creating the very thing you're trying to like parody. Either way, apparently it's very good, and it has been on my I would love to play it at some point.
It's a PS3 and 360 game. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna throw out another game that I would consider a zombie game: Sunset Overdrive. Definitely a zombie game.
That's a zombie game?
Because the whole premise was that there's like an energy drink, and the energy drink turns people into zombies or monsters or whatever.
I had no idea.
Yep, that's the whole premise. So I mean, it is also like Borderlands, in regards to just over the top with its comedy. But yeah, no, zombie game. Although, even though Borderlands isn't a zombie game in its totality, the zombie DLC is one of the most legendary zombie games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so good.
Well, we literally just went through and probably covered the best zombie games at some point or another in our discussion so far. So I don't feel like we can skip what are the best zombie games and just go with the next question, which is, do you think in general that zombies work well in video games? Do they work better as protagonists or do they work better as antagonists? I'm going to say they do work well in video games. I don't think I've ever played zombies would be awful as protagonists. And the reason why is because the whole fantasy of zombies centers around the idea of I know I keep harping on this idea, but tapping into that cultural fear. It's that idea of I'm one of the fantasies of the zombie that in the same way that zombie apocalypses tap into certain fears, they also tap into certain fantasies. And the fantasy of the zombie apocalypse is I am one of the few ones who didn't succumb to this. I am one of the few ones who has my mind, didn't fall prey to this thing that robbed everybody of their minds. Me, I alone am the smart one still amongst all the dummies.
I'm better than all of them.
Exactly. There's sort of superiority, I didn't fall victim to this. Yep. One of my favorite things to say is out of 100 people who have zombie survival plans, only one of them is going to actually be able to execute it because the rest of them will be zombies. Because that's the definition of the zombie apocalypse is everyone. You don't have a zombie horde if everyone managed to fight off the fight, right? If anyone, exactly. So in order to have that, you have to assent to the fact that the vast majority of not just your friends and family, but humanity are these things.
You also want to know a real world example of this?
What's that?
The pandemic of 2020.
Oh,
coronavirus.
Yeah. Right. So that through the zombie. It's
that's it. We're done with zombie. Yeah.
I saw a meme that was 2020 showed us that the zombie, the idea of the zombie survivors is ridiculous because the vast majority of people would just be like, those aren't real, that's a government conspiracy, and they would just run towards them and just get bitten and consumed immediately.
Yep, that's it. Yeah.
So they work as antagonists for two reasons, right? Because number one, you get to sort of, by the very nature of having a protagonist that is not a zombie, you get to indulge that fantasy of being one of the few survivors. Additionally, as I also mentioned at the top, they work great as enemies because you don't have to feel bad for mowing them down in droves. Yeah. That same psychology is used. It's the primary reason why most video game, even people that you kill, are wearing masks of some kind because we can kill something that has a mask on, it's not a person. It's just a different flavor of monster. Look, they're wearing a mask. I can't see their face. The minute you can see people's faces, you begin to tap into that empathy that humans have that says, oh, I should probably feel bad about killing people. Some people don't have that, or some people are able to tamper that down. And yes, sometimes video games can cause a manner of desensitization towards that, but the vast majority of us are just not okay with mowing down people. But zombies, they're just bodies of monsters that don't, they're dead. They're already dead. So I can kill them as much as I want. Exactly. There's no moral consequence to killing them. So sweet. It's the easy mode for morality in video game writing. So usually in order to get us to kill someone, you have to like traumatize us first and be like, oh, but they killed someone you loved. So go mercilessly slaughter them now joyfully and gleefully, which I have done many times to video game characters who have wronged me fictionally, of course.
Another aspect of do zombies work well in video games? Yes. Mechanics. Let's talk about how zombies are in games. They are usually impervious to physical damage. They keep coming. Some games lean into the slow, lurking, moaning, crunchy, scary zombies, and then they lurch at you, and they take so many hits to kill because they're so impervious to damage. Then you have like the survival horror mechanic where like you have very limited resources of ammo and defenses, and you have something that's like a bullet sponge that can just take a lot, and you can kind of marry those together. And then you also have the idea of a ton, just a huge amount of something that's easy to kill. That's the Left 4 Deads and some of the RTSs and the tower defenses.
Days Gone.
There's so many Days Gone. Yeah, the hordes are like really epitomized in Days Gone.
So you have to strategy. The idea is you have to strategize. It's not so much like you have limited resources. It's that you have limited resources in comparison to the amount of things you have to kill. So it's almost like in the other direction where it's like the limitation comes from there's more than you could ever do without using everything at your disposal, or at least some kind of strategy.
In Days Gone, you got to funnel the horde through obstacles, and you can line you can line it with propane tanks and then use Molotov cocktails and like explosives, but you had to like prepare. You had to go in advance and like set the things up, set the trip bombs, set down the things, and then you had to go and like get their attention and then guide them through. And that's a very cool and very neat horde mode. There's an entire mode dedicated to what started as like zombies in Call of Duty. And so like every game after that they're chunked on like horde mode. I remember Gears of War had one, Halo's got them. Like it was the battle royales before battle royales were a thing, was the zombie mode or the horde mode where you just fight off wave after wave after wave of massive amounts of enemies, and you have to strategize about what traps and blockades you set up.
Sometimes the horde mode was like there's no end to it. It just you get as far as you can. Like classic arcadey kind of like you try to get the high score and try to get as far as you can, and that's the goal, not to beat the game and get to the end. It's just there's no end. You just try to get as far as you can and then have bragging rights. I got farther. I got to level 45 of horde mode. How far did you get? So
it's pretty cool. You have a wide swath of like what you can do with zombies as far as a game creator and like what kind of game you want to what you want to do,
so much
and like
that
how
it
they
has
behave.
Been done to death, which leads us to our next question. What are the pitfalls of zombies in games? And I would say number one is the pitfalls of making zombie games are making zombie games now. It's just so overdone. It's still to this day where it's like almost a knock against a game if it's got zombies in it now, because it's just been overdone. It was so easy. It was such a I mean, for lack of a better term, cash grab of like this. We don't have to actually put any effort into this because people are going to buy it due solely. And that was true for so long, to their credit. But now it's low effort, right? I would say the pitfalls of zombie games is that it comes across as low effort. Even if your zombies aren't zombies, it's like, yeah, we know, right? Like I always kind of roll my eyes in the early, levels of even a From Software game, because many of them just have zombies, right? Like the fodder enemies at the beginning of most of those games are even just zombies. Dark Souls has them. Elden Ring has them. Zombies.
They're everywhere.
Yeah. Yep. So
what's funny is I like highlighted the creativity of the mechanics that you can employ with zombies. You can go across the board, but now it's also the other side of that exact same coin. Is it's predictable, it's easy, it's low hanging fruit, and again, you dehumanize an enemy and you just make it something easy to slaughter, like you said, fodder. and you can just like throw them out and not have to worry
Right.
about
And when,
personality and
sure, or even just like on the other end of the mechanical scale, it's like there's only so much you can do with the actual individual unit of a zombie as far as like a threatening thing. I mean, that's why Resident Evil may start with zombies, but it doesn't take a couple hours into the game before you're encountering things like lickers and other terrifying things, and there's a good reason for that. And they do well to employ those more advanced versions of the monsters because those are more interesting to fight in almost every occasion, right? Like, and so many games that have zombies, they usually evolve it past that. I mean, I was stoked in Last of Us Part 2 where they had that big hulking thing that Abby encounters, and the Rat King, I think is what they called it, and it was just like, it was nuts. It was awesome. And I was like, yay, something different that's actually now making me think I can't use the same strategies I've been using the whole game for these things. And that is, it's always, I have found that I have more fun engaging things that make me have to think about how I fight them and change my strategies, or just have to, scale my way through it, as is true with From Software stuff, where it's like, I actually have to think about how this fight is different than the last fight. This fight has things that I have to worry about that I didn't have to worry about in other fights. I feel like that to me is almost always more engaging than just, okay, like, cool, how am I going to puzzle my way through this same zombie encounter? So, yeah, but because it's almost always just more like there's more of them. It's how you make it harder. So, yeah.
Just add more, throw more at it.
Yep. So, cool. Well, I think that leads us to our last question. Wrap up pretty good and still got banter in. What do you want to see from zombie games in the future? Where do you want them to go other than away?
I mean, I guess the Dying Light with the parkour is something innovative, using the environment more as a thing than just, like, I guess. I don't know. There's got to be a way to innovate something different that's not just the zombies themselves that I don't know the answer for. But like you said, less is more in this case. Like, way fewer zombie games would be great, so that when one does come out again, it hits right, like the timing is right, and we know just what like it'll be.
Yeah. Let's have a game where we play as the zombies. But here's the thing. It's a massively multiplayer game, and you have to make the zombie, like, everyone starts as a person, and then like randomly someone gets infected, and then you have to go infect other people. The closest thing I can think about as to like this working was the original zombie or ghoul or undead outbreak that happened in World of Warcraft before Wrath of the Lich King. They had an event, and you could get infected by an NPC and become a ghoul in this case, but you were effectively a zombie. And then you had an ability called Bite, and it would infect other players. And when they died, they'd come back as a zombie, and you could it's what you would do. You'd go around and just like, you'd be the zombie and you'd go infect people, and it would spread, and it would be thousands of players. I believe in Shatrath was the big city at the time. They would just be swarming the crap out of the entire city. And then there would be people who were dedicated to fighting them off. They made it their goal to fight. I think they had some classes that you could use. I think one, like the priest class or whatever, could like actually cure it. So you had people that were like trying to cure it as fast as possible, but it would almost always be, they'd get overwhelmed. But then even if you go away from the major cities, you go to just those random, where like newbies would be leveling in Westfall, and this player controlled zombie would come after them. And I like, it was so innovative, even at the time, even a decade ago when Wrath of the Lich King came out. But never have I seen a video game try to do that again in the same way. And yet it would be good.
Shallow if that's all it was. Like, if it was just an MMO centered around that would be shallow. It would have to have some sort of
shallow games. I don't know. Sometimes I argue that some of the best. I mean, how really deep is Fortnite? I mean, yeah, you have to know the guns and the maps and the like how to build stuff, I guess. But like sometimes the simplest concepts are the ones that take off. And I don't know. I could see it working. I could see it working even just as a social experiment to see how see how
it would be a little bit different, like that. Having that kind of thing added or bolted onto World of Warcraft with PvP and the World of Warcraft characters and all that stuff is one thing. But if you took like Rainbow Six Siege level of realism with military tactics and did that, where it's like the whole idea of the game would be to actually defend off a real zombie apocalypse but also monitor the social aspects of spreading the disease and stuff. Like that could be interesting and maybe have enough depth. And if it was on like, what was the name of that big shooter? Was it PlanetSide? PlanetSide 2? That was like planets were at war. And when you could jump in, it was the MMO was always connected all the time. And then you had 3 factions. You could fight for your country and take over planets. And it was like battles on the scale of Battlefield, like huge 64 versus 64 players, huge battles. And then you would fight for land and then you grab a planet.
I mean,
you could do something like that, but like
you could even do it without the player versus player aspect of it. That's like, there are so many games out there that work in the other direction where everyone's playing cooperatively against, NPC AI controlled zombies. Like, why not have it the other way around where like the challenge of the game is the NPCs are all people and everyone plays cooperatively as the zombie horde against them, and they're super strong and they have guns and stuff, so you have to then figure out the strategy of the zombies. It almost be like there is, in the same way that sometimes there is sort of this idea of a mind controlling the zombies, right? They seem mindless, but there is a mind controlling. In this case, the mind would be the internet, right? All figuring out how to best strategize against the hardest fortresses that the developers can design. I think that'd be cool. It would work. Why not in the other direction, right? Like sometimes when it's like something's gotten stale, let's try it. Try doing like flipping it on its head. And to me, that would be the most obvious flip on the head that I've never really seen done at all. So that's my answer. We want to hear your thoughts, listeners. So how can zombie games innovate, or should they just go away? And we should just get away from the whole notion of it and be more creative and stop designing games that are just not zombies, that are actually just zombies. And so, we want to hear all that from you and more. Do you love zombie games? Do you hate zombie games? Do you want to? Do you have a zombie apocalypse plan still in 2022, even though it's so 2005? Yeah. All those thoughts and more. Termite.
You can tell me how excited you are to play 11 new zombie games coming in 2023. Over at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website where we have links to all of our social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, Discord, Twitch, and TikTok. TikTok.com.
TikTok.
Is it just TikTok.com/80bitpodsmash? TikTok/80bitpodsmash?
If you go to TikTok's website, I promise you they will just try to force feed their app down your throat. And at this point, guys, just give in. Like, in the spirit of zombies, just like accept it and stop being trying to be the cool lone survivor of the TikTok apocalypse. TikTok-apocalypse. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everyone just thinks you're a hipster. You're not cool. Sorry. No one's like looking up to you because you're not getting on TikTok. No, I'm just kidding, guys. Do whatever you want. Or not do whatever you want. It's whatever. I don't care. It's just get off my back. But if you have like, I don't know, a little cousin who's on TikTok, tell them, hey, this podcast I listen to is on there now, and you should see their stupid content they're probably putting out.
Yep. So as always, we are family friendly. We talk we warn in advance if there's any explicit topics, but we use fair language and realize that you might have a little one in the car, or you might be in mixed company, and we don't want to deter anyone from listening to our show. So TikTok will follow the same guidelines as all of our other social media outlets do. In case you are coming from any of those outlets I just mentioned and you're wondering about this podcast we keep talking about, every Monday at midnight, we drop a new episode, an hour long, about a various topic and how it relates to video games. And that is on all of our major platforms: Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. And there's an RSS feed you can drop into any link or any app you would like. So go check us out. Subscribe, like, share, follow, tell your friends, pull the car over and yell at someone how awesome 80-Bit Pod Smash is.
Sweet. All right. Next week, we're going to, I guess, ask the question in honor of God of War coming out, or having just come out. We're going to talk about Sony again. But this time we're going to talk about how the fact that we're 2 years into this next generation, the PS5 generation, so to speak, coming up on the 2-year anniversary of it, in fact. And there's a narrative that's starting to form. Now, Termite doesn't think there's a narrative because he hasn't heard it in his circles. I, on the other hand, have heard it a lot, and I've been talking about it. But we're going to kind of chronicle and put together all of the evidence of the, or lack of evidence, of the growing narrative of how Sony is losing control of this generation. Or maybe they're not, and it's just an overblown narrative. Nevertheless, we're going to talk about it and sort of piece together all the evidence, and then looking at the whole, we're going to decide, is Sony falling or not? And we'll do that next week. So we'll see you then.
Look forward to it. See you next week.